But I do think it is a lot harder to date as a woman high earner, and especially as a Black woman high earner. And there's a couple of reasons why I think that is the case, but generally speaking, it is harder to date. And in my experience, one thing that I have noticed is that...
What's up, guys? And welcome back to the channel. And today's video is all about the money. I have a few clips here about successful women who struggle when it comes to finding a partner. So let's get into the mess and see what they have to say.
If you're a woman who has gone through your education, you've dedicated yourself to achieving a degree, your mother's generation wasn't able to achieve this, and you're the first person that's maybe gone to uni or got a bachelor's or got a master's or got a PhD, and then you spend some time in a career grinding away and you now earn 150 grand a year, and you think, right, I'm 31, I'd love to settle down, this would be amazing for me. Where are all of the men at? Hang on a second. And what you realize is that not only now are you competing with all of the other increasing cohort of women that are high achievers with status, employment, and education, but you're also competing with a 21-year-old barista who still lives at home with her parents for this small cohort of guys.
When he talks about the small cohort of guys, I'm gonna assume he's talking about men who earn 150K and up. There's nothing wrong with a woman wanting to make big achievements in life and strive for whatever financial goals she has. But it's not necessarily going to be what attracts the kind of partner she wants. Throughout history, women have always looked towards men to provide resources to ensure their survival and the survival of any children they have. And even though we're not living in the wild anymore, this desire is still very much present in a woman's wants when it comes to finding a man, especially when we're talking about a man of worth. This doesn't mean that a guy who makes a lot of money won't date a woman who's in the same tax bracket as him. But unlike most successful women, he's not limited to choosing someone who's at his level or above. A successful man is much more likely to date a chick who works for minimum wage than the other way around, because he's not looking to her to provide for him. While this isn't going to happen due to how women's brains are wired, they could stop judging men based on their status and income when it comes to finding a mate. But going forward into the future, it may actually become necessary.
That requires sympathy for women, okay? That is not a good position for women to be in. At the same time, this huge cohort of sexless men, 30% of men haven't had sex in the last year, 50% of men say that they are not looking for a relationship. You are a man. You have been through your 20s. You know the power of the male sex drive between the ages of 18 and 30. Can you imagine getting yourself into a situation where you say, I'm not bothered about pursuing women? That is an unbelievably extreme statement for men to make, and they're self-identifying as this in Pew Research data. This isn't on incel forums, this is Pew Research. 50% of men aren't looking for a relationship.
When they say aren't looking for a relationship, do they mean I'm not looking for a woman or I'm not looking for commitment?
And not actively pursuing any kind of interaction with women.
Oh, shit.
Casual included.
To say 50% of men have completely checked out of the dating game is a wild statement. But there is a growing number of men who are making a conscious effort to check out of dating, and with more people choosing the single life, I can only imagine what the future will look like. Results from a Pew Research Center survey of 6,034 U.S. adults conducted from the 5th of July to the 17th in 2022 show that you are definitely not alone. That survey found that 30% of the U.S. adults surveyed to be single, which was defined as not being married, not living with a partner, and not being in a committed romantic relationship. This percentage was higher, 47%, among adults under 30 years of age, and lower, at 21% among 30 to 49-year-olds, and at 30% for those 50 years and older. When it comes to dating, young men are having a rough time, especially the guys who rely solely on dating apps to try and meet someone. While women are flooded with messages and might struggle to actually choose a guy they can go the distance with, most guys aren't getting any interest from women at all, so eventually, they just give up. There's also the risks and issues that come along with getting divorced, child support, alimony, and in some instances, false accusations, all of which have caused some men to want to stay away from women. Online, you'll find people mocking and making jokes about guys who feel like they've been rejected from the dating game. But as this group continues to get bigger, eventually, if we're not already, you'll start to see other problems forming in society because of it. If on a large scale, men became completely disengaged from society, what do you think will happen when there's a crisis? Do you think these men will feel inspired to help?
Hot take while I get my legs electrocuted in Mexico. Men are not intimidated by successful women. They care more about how you care about them and take care of them. Men are turned off by angry, aggressive, competitive women. In fact, men don't actually care what you do for work. Really successful men actually care about and want to support very successful women. They're just not attracted to them because it's inconvenient for them. He respects her, he supports her, he's never going to ask her to stop working. However, it's inconvenient to him because when he wants to go somewhere or do something, she's also going somewhere and doing something. Which is why most of the time the successful woman gets replaced with a barista. Rich men value convenience, not competition.
I mean, this makes sense to me. I've heard plenty of well-off guys talk about how they'd rather have a wife who stayed home to look after the kids and whatnot, because they're already making enough for everyone to live comfortably. For guys who are making the big bucks, having a woman take care of most things in the home sets things up so they can make even more money as they can spend their time more efficiently. Building a life with someone is a partnership, and if two people can find a way to complement each other's lives and make things easier, you're off to a good start. If a woman's dating a very successful man who probably works a lot of hours and is under a lot of stress, the last thing he wants is to come home to chaos instead of peace, which is why women who are nurturing and supportive are so attractive. He also probably doesn't want to come back to an empty home either or have to rely on other people raising the children because his wife's too busy. Now, if a successful woman wants to have a family but doesn't have the time to raise the kids like a stay-at-home mom would be, they could find themselves a guy who'd be happy to take on the role, and I'm sure there are plenty of them. But we all know that these guys aren't the type of men who make women get weak at the knees.
I've talked a lot about this before and people didn't like it too much, like men in particular. But I do think it is a lot harder to date as a woman high earner, and especially as a Black woman high earner. And there's a couple of reasons why I think that is the case, but generally speaking, it is harder to date. And in my experience, one thing that I have noticed is that men, when they come into your sphere, especially if you're someone who's not necessarily withdrawn or or quiet per se, right? You have opinions and they don't like that, right? And some of them, they just want you to shut up and be quiet and just be behind them. And that's not me.
When she talks about men coming into her sphere, I'm going to assume that she's talking about guys who are high earners just like her. And if that's the case, they likely have certain personality traits that allowed them to achieve a high level of success. Just like I said earlier, men who are in high-powered jobs don't necessarily need to get with someone who brings the same shit to the table as them. And while they might respect a woman's hardworking nature and success, it's probably not a trait they're looking for or even need when it comes to finding a viable partner. Now, she did specify that it's even harder for Black women who are successful to find a partner or date. And I'd like to know why she thinks that. While we could probably come up with a few assumptions of our own, it'd be much better if she went into more detail about it.
But also others of them, they're just jealous. And obviously it's not like they're saying to you, oh, I'm jealous, but you can see that they're jealous because they'll make snide comments or they'll be little things along those lines. Or some of them, I wouldn't attribute this one to jealousy, but just more so they want to be kept. They'll say you're the one with all the money, and sometimes jokingly we're just okay, but that's not a funny joke if I don't know you. So I will say for those reasons, it is a lot harder, but also another reason it's harder in general, I think, is because once you are making above a certain amount, you usually have a certain kind of lifestyle. And if you want to maintain that lifestyle, but also include your significant other in that lifestyle, they do have to be making within that range, right? I'm not saying that I will only date someone who makes more than me. That's absolutely not the case, but you do need to be probably making, low to mid six figures, somewhere 200 or higher.
When she talks about men who want to be kept, I doubt that this would be the kind of guy she'd even give the time of day to. And I could be wrong, but I saw another one of her videos where she talks about how she spends her money. And from what I remember, she's making about $500K a year, which is a lot, and it's not even her final form. The question is though, would a guy making the $200K she asked for want to date her, or would he rather build with a woman who isn't so career-focused? When she talks about maintaining her lifestyle and it not being something she'd want to change because a man makes less than her, do the men she surrounds herself with think the same way? I'm a brokey, but if I was making that sort of money, I wouldn't need a partner to match that energy. And if I'm building a life with someone, I'd create a lifestyle that'd be easily affordable. And if for some reason that wasn't enough, I'd find a way to make more.
In order for us to have the lifestyle that I envision myself living, and mind you, I'm still working towards the lifestyle that I want to be living. But if I like to take vacations and I like to buy, diversify my investments and do all these different kinds of things, you need to be able to do that too, right? Like, I'm not here just funding your lifestyle. We need to be able to do this together. And so naturally, you have to have some sort of cushion on your own before you come into my sphere, before we can even really get along or be in the same like tax bracket. But again, I wouldn't say like he has to make more than me, but he does need to make close to it, or somewhere that would allow him to still be in that same area or same arena of what it is, of what my lifestyle is like and what I'm hoping it to be, right? Because the goal for me is at least to build generational wealth, and you can do that from a full-time job. I work full-time, but I also have significant side hustles, and yeah, it takes a lot of time, but to me it's worth it, right? Because I'm young, I have the time, I have the energy, and then later on in life, I'm just going to be able to like chill and just live off of what the hard work that I've been putting in now.
See, I noticed how she said she wasn't interested in funding the guy's lifestyle, which to me is one of the leading differences between men and women. Most men don't have an issue when it comes to paying for everything for their partner, as long as they don't feel like they're being used or taken advantage of. When men are making that sort of money, what's more important to them is finding someone who can make their life better in non-material ways.
You had replied to this and also asked about like splitting expenses and different things like that. I don't believe in, like merging money or anything like that unless I am married, which I am not. And so I wasn't doing any of that. In terms of like dating, I still do think a man, especially for the first few dates, needs to be paying for the dates. Like, they need to be doing the courting, the courtship, all of that. To kind of sum up, because this is long, dating is a lot more difficult. Oh, you had also commented about like where to meet them. I also made a video on this that some people didn't like, but in my experience, there's multiple ways to meet men who are high earners, or whatever it is you want to call them. And one of the easiest and best ways is to change your environment, right? If you're only hanging around other high earners, or only hanging around other professionals or entrepreneurs or people who are like-minded, that is going to become your circle of influence. That is going to become your norm. And so naturally you are going to meet those kinds of people. Like, for example, I was just at a conference and it was all attorneys.
Even though I think most guys, especially at the level she's looking to date, will happily pay for dates and all that, it's still odd to me that he's expected to, despite the fact that they're both making good money. I mean, with all this talk about men and women being equal these days, when will it become the norm for everyone to just pay for their own shit, or at least not seem like something women are entitled to? Anyway, what she says about hanging around high earners, if you're looking to find a partner in that space, is entirely correct. There are so many videos on YouTube and other platforms with women talking about how they want a six-figure man, but have never met anyone who makes that kind of money. Once you're able to work your way into these circles, though, the question is, do the men there want whatever it is you're selling? Anyway, before we move on to the next clip, guys, you've got to listen to some of these comments, as some netizens were going back and forth. Same. I'm a high earner as a data scientist, and I've been with my husband since freshman year in college. He's a teacher, and the differences in career and lifestyle wasn't as obvious, but now. Then this person jumps in and says, same. And every other high-earning woman I know usually met their spouses young and still significantly out-earn their spouses. I guess that's good and bad. I don't know. And this guy replied, if it's the other way around, men don't care. Don't let internet dating spoil your peace. And the last comment from this little thread was, husbands haven't cared for centuries. And just one more comment before we move on. When I worked in corporate, most of the guys weren't checking for us as wives. They wanted a stay-at-home wife. They might date a high earner, but they're not actively looking for one. And this comment is exactly what people are always talking about when they're having debates and things like that. But yeah, let's check out this last video for the day.
Something we don't acknowledge on the left is that women aren't interested in mating with men who aren't economically viable.
Why do we hate those women? Because when it was reversed, when it was more men graduating from college, you didn't see women lining up to hate them. And now those young men look at those women, those successful women, and they look at them with anger, with fury. Explain this one to me.
So you're absolutely right. And when these men get isolated, they are more prone to misogynistic content. They're less likely to believe in climate change. They're more prone to the conspiracy theory. I want to be clear. No one has an obligation to service men who aren't having sex. No group has fallen further faster in our nation than young men.
I mean, we all know the answer to this, and it's because women look for men who can provide. But that's not what men are looking for in women. But when they talk about men looking at successful women with hate, I don't think that's the case at all, at least not for most men. The fact is, men have an evolutionary drive to provide. So when they see a woman who has everything, what probably happens in the primal region of our brain is, we start thinking, well, what can I do for her? She doesn't need me. And from the woman's side, she's probably thinking, well, what can he do for me? I don't need him. The more successful women become, it seems like more and more men are starting to feel like they're invisible. And unfortunately, they are to most women who are making a lot of money. And like the guy said, young men start looking for communities that will accept them and make them feel heard. And why wouldn't they, especially if they feel like nobody cares? I will say though, rather than being quick to label guys as misogynistic or toxic, society would be much better off if we recognized the issue and tried to come up with ways to deal with it. Just because we're living in a time of female empowerment, it doesn't mean we have to stop caring about the issues men face. And while things like hypergamy aren't flattering concepts for women, acting like it's not a thing isn't really doing anybody any good. Anyway guys, that's about it for today. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps me out. And if you want to share your own thoughts in the comments, I'll see you down there.